Hello guys, welcome to Tiny Fibre Studio. This is the first episode of this new podcast about knitting and spinning, and specifically about my journey towards being a more purposeful spinner. That's my aim for 2017. So first of all, just a little bit of background about myself. So I'm Becks and I've been knitting since I was a little kid. I was taught by my mum, my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And I seem to remember knitting some horrible yellow acrylic scarf that never really got finished. So consequently, I gave it up for a very, very long time and eventually came back to it about 8 years ago. And I've been knitting ever since. I've been spinning for about 6 years, coming up to 6 years now. And I consider myself to be a relatively consistent spinner. Most of the yarns that I produce are nice and even in their weight. So just as a bit of a frame of reference, this is something that I spun relatively recently. And if I show you that one, hopefully you can see that that's a pretty consistent yarn. It certainly came out the way that I wanted it to, and I'm really happy with that. But the problem is that not all of my yarns come out to be the weight that I would want. And I really want to change that. So I'm fairly happy with my hand spinning generally, but there are a couple of things that I really want to work on this year, and that's why I've decided that this year is going to be handspun 17, which means that I'm only going to knit with my own handspun for the whole of this year. It's going to mean putting a few projects on hold. Originally I was going to kind of say that projects that I've already started in commercial yarns don't count and that I could carry on doing those. I've since decided that, you know what, I'm just going to go all out and everything is going to be handspun this year. That means a couple of things. First of all, it means that projects that I have lined up or, knitting patterns that I want to make, I either have to raid my handspun stash or I have to spin it myself. I'm currently working on spinning something myself, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But there are a couple of things that I want to gain from this experience of trying to be a more purposeful spinner. The first thing is that I want to be able to spin for specific projects and spin successfully for specific projects. The reason I say that is that I have tried to spin for particular projects before and it's not always been completely successful, either because the yarn has turned out to be the wrong weight or because there's not enough of it. So I need to plan that a little bit more carefully. And I would say that's also true of the yarns that I spin for the sake of spinning. There's nothing wrong with spinning for the sake of spinning. If you enjoy it and you don't have anything in particular in mind and you just want to spin, that's totally fine, do it. The problem is that a lot of times when I do that, I spin normally kind of a 4-ply sock weight yarn, but there's usually not enough of it to make the kinds of projects that I want to make. And that's where the issue is. So, 2 goals for this handspun 17. One is to be able to spin for specific projects, and the other one is to be able to spin, if I'm just spinning for the sake of spinning, to be able to spin in quantities that I know I will be able to use. So I've been kind of planning to do something along the lines of podcasts or a YouTube channel or something for about a year or so now. A year ago I was doing a lot of stuff on Periscope and I thought that I might kind of transition over to YouTube. But this was also sort of held back by the fact that I wondered whether I really had enough stuff to talk about. Now that I'm doing handspun 17 and that I'm really focused this year on my spinning, I have something to talk about. Obviously there's also going to be a lot of discussion about knitting as well, because once I have spun that stuff I then want to make it into things, so there will be some discussion about knitting, also possibly dyeing and lots of other things. This was also partially inspired by the fact that my friend Katie, she was talking about doing a complete stash diet in 2017. not buying any yarn at all. I think she can do it, and the reason I think she can do it is that I've seen her stash, and her stash absolutely reflects who she is now. My stash, not so much. It's a complete mishmash of stuff. Some of it I would absolutely use, others, they're not really me anymore. They're the things that I used to like when I first started knitting. You know, skeins that are really pretty, but they're variegated, and actually I don't really knit a lot of stuff that's variegated. Katie's is all, you know, all the colours that she would use, all the quantities that she would use. Mine absolutely isn't. So I guess part of the aim of this is to get to a point where maybe next year I would feel comfortable with the amount of stash that I have that I will actually use. And the other thing that's kind of on my mind with this whole challenge is that the title of this podcast is Tiny Fibre Studio. And that's partially inspired by the fact that I really adore the tiny house movement. I like the idea of living with less. Those who know me well enough to get invited round will realise that I have a lot of stuff, and that's partially because I have hobbies that take up a lot of space. My spinning, obviously fibre, spinning wheels, tools, fibre prep stuff, it all takes up a lot of space. My commercial yarn stash takes up a lot of space. Let's not even get into the Lego, that's a whole other issue. But every time that I've thought about this and thought about how much space my hobbies take up, it's kind of inspired some decisions over the last year. So the first decision was to get this little thing, which I freaking love. It's amazing. If you don't know what it is, it's a Hansencrafts Minispinner, and it's just basically a small electric version of a spinning wheel. It does the same job, and that's what I've been spinning on for about the last 7 or 8 months now, and completely love it. I'm totally converted. The reason that I got that was to try to get to a situation where my spinning wheel and the tools that go with it and some fibre could all fit in something the size of a carry-on suitcase. And it does. It and all 3 of the flyers that I have for it, and 8 Akerworks bobbins. There's these 3D printed bobbins, which again I love. I'll talk about those a lot more in another podcast. I switched over to that in order to try to see how small I could get my spinning stash. And that was because last year I was kind of thinking a little bit about moving back to London. That's no longer relevant necessarily, but I was thinking about how do I take that hobby that I don't want to give up and make it fit in a smaller space. So one of the things that I do want to figure out in this Handspun 17 challenge is whether I like fibre preparation enough to own a drum carder and combs and hand carders, or whether I could feasibly get somebody else to do the fibre prep for me and therefore save quite a lot of space. So currently I have 4 spinning wheels. I have the mini spinner, I have a Shack Matchless, a Shack Sidekick, and an Ash for Joy. The Sidekick is probably going to get sold relatively soon, just because I'm not using it as a portable wheel at the moment because I'm using the mini spinner. The Matchless was a complete bargain. Again, I might talk about that in a bit more detail in another podcast. It was a total bargain. I would find it very hard to get rid of that. So at the moment it's 4 wheels. It may go down a little bit in the next few weeks, maybe. Having said that, I've also been asked to teach a spinning class, and the person who asked me was like, so how many spinning wheels do you actually have access to right now? So I probably wouldn't want to get rid of, let's say, the Ashford Joy, because at the moment, just because that's quite a nice, easily accessible beginner's wheel. One of the things that I know I need to get better at with this Handspun 17 project is keeping records. Currently, my record keeping when it comes to spinning sucks. I mean, really badly sucks. I don't label things. A lot of bags of fibre that are still undyed and unspun are not labelled. I have no idea what they are. I can kind of guess based on what I know I've ordered, but I don't really know for sure. I sometimes put finished handspun on Ravelry, but not always. I'm just not good. I couldn't replicate any of my handspun yarns because I don't have records. So I have a plan, and that plan involves this. So this is going to be my my record keeping for Handspun 17. It's a simple stories album, which, if you've not come across it, is it's really to do with scrapbooking. I used to be a scrapbooker. I was once runner-up of Scrapbooker of the Year. Thank you very much. I was into scrapbooking in a really big way, but then it just got too complicated and I dropped out of it. Later on, I kind of came back to it with Becky Higgins' Project Life system, and I did one physical album with it, but I do it digitally now. The thing with spinning is it's very hard to keep digital records, so that's why I'm using this. So inside you have pages that are just divided into different sections. So I've got, this is going to be a little sort of title page to explain what this album's all about. And then on this page, this is the start of my actual record keeping. So at the moment I'm working on spinning some sport weight, Polwarth, Merino and Zwartbles mix. Zwartbles, I have no idea, however you pronounce it. Please, somebody let me know. And it's a great example of why you should keep records when you're spinning, because this stuff fluffs up like you would not believe once you finish your yarn. So let me just show you. We've got the single up here. This is the 2-ply back. There's a 3-ply back, and then the 3-ply finished yarn. But then once you wash it, it gets to this. And I don't know how clearly you can see that, but there is a significant size difference between the unfinished and the finished yarn. That project is the classic example of why you keep records in spinning, and that is how I'm keeping my records this year. So I'll keep you up to date with that as we go through. So although that Polwarth, Merino and Zwartbles mix is not currently on my wheel, you can probably see there's nothing except a leader. I have some samples that I've been knitting from the samples that I've already spun. And we'll start with this one. This was from the original bat that I carded at home just to see how the Polwarth, Merino, Zwartbles thing would work. And this is what we have. So you should be able to see from that it's relatively consistent, looks pretty nice, but it's definitely not a sport weight. It's more of a DK weight. When I measured it, it was I think 24 stitches to 4 inches, so a little bit more on the sort of DK, slightly worsted maybe. But it's great, it feels really nice, I really like that, but it's not quite the weight that I want. And then this one, this is still a bit of a work in progress, still on my needles, but this is what I'm getting to at the moment. That is a little bit closer. It's not as consistent, but it's definitely closer to what I want. So once all of that is finished, it's going to hopefully be the cowl that Ysolda Teague did for Knitworthy 3, the big version, obviously, because you may be able to tell I'm kind of into big shawls and cowls and stuff at the moment. So it takes quite a lot of yarn, but I do have about 450 grams of that mix. World of Wool did a custom blend for me, so I have that, and it's kind of repeatable, although not completely colour matchable, I guess. So that's what I've got in progress at the moment. So what else can you expect to see in this podcast? Well, I do have a few episodes in mind. The first thing is probably going to be something to do with sorting out my handspun stash, so that I can get an idea of where I am with my hand spinning at the moment, what yarns I'm producing and what I actually need. So that will be one episode, but I'm also thinking about some tutorials and stuff as well. I will definitely do a tour of all of my equipment that I use, but let me know what you guys want to see. I'm pretty committed to making these podcasts last between 20 minutes and half an hour. I don't want them to be massive long podcasts, just because it's a huge time commitment, not only for me, but for you as well. And I really appreciate your time coming to watch this podcast in the first place. So please let me know what you think you would like to see. So I'm going to wrap up this episode now. In between now and the next time, you can find me as Tiny Fibre Studio on Instagram, Becks on Ravelry, and there will be a Tiny Fibre Studio group on Ravelry as well, where I will post show notes and so on and so forth. So until the next time, thank you very much for coming and joining me for my first episode. Please leave me comments, let me know what you think, let me know if there's anything that you want to see from this podcast, anything that you would be interested in, and I will do my best to accommodate. So until then, thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next time.